But I do remember our daughter, whenever we were taking her at first, that it was very traumatic for her.
It's hard. It
was hard because she had been exclusively home with me, and I was just told, the societal norm is that that's normal. They're going to get over it.
Welcome into another episode of Making the Leap. And this is one of the episodes that we are calling Mom to Mom, where once a month I will speak to moms who are focused on raising kids with a biblical worldview and what that entails. And today I am really excited to have back with us a guest that we've had on before. We had Ashley Mackie with her husband Tyler, and today I get just Ashley. It was about a year and a half ago in the hot July Missouri sun, and now it's the freezing cold Missouri snow-packed weather. So that's kind of a little bit of a change. But I very specifically wanted to talk not just about school with you today and education, although that is hugely important. The biblical worldview is important, but just kind of that faith journey as a mom and what that involves, because everybody's is so different. Yours and mine is very different. We've talked a little bit before about the intensity of some people, their thought process, their outlook, and how that's different from you and that's different from me. But we're all kind of here for the same purpose. So Ashley, I'm so glad to have you so glad to talk with you today. And we'll just have this little conversation just to kind of set for everybody your background, because they may not have heard that episode with you and Tyler when you came. We talked a little bit just about your education journey and a little bit about how you got to that point. So if you don't mind sharing just a tiny bit about your background, how you got to the education piece of things, so that we kind of have that recapped for people, if you don't mind.
Sure. And thank you so much for having me again. Yeah. We are in our 5th year of homeschool.
Okay.
One that I never would have seen myself doing, as I believe so many of the now homeschoolers are the same, and it's just something that God lays on our hearts, and then it's like a seed that just keeps growing and blooming. So I really thought that we would send our kids to public school, and I was a stay-at-home mom.
Okay.
I had sent our daughter into a preschool a couple days a week, and I thought that was just the natural progression. Now, it was a Christian preschool, and it
Did that matter when you chose it, that it was a Christian preschool, or was it just like, this is the preschool?
It didn't. Yeah. Okay. I just was looking for somewhere that at the time I thought that our daughter needed to be socialized, that was really a thing, that kids at 2 need to be socialized. And, looking back, I wish that I would have done it different. I don't know why I have a crack. But I do remember our daughter, whenever we were taking her at first, that it was very traumatic for her.
It's hard. It
was hard because she had been exclusively home with me, and I was just told, the societal norm is that that's normal. They're going to get over it, and they do.
Right.
And, kids are incredibly resilient, and it was fine. We did end up making a change, but it was when I was going the same path with our son, who was 3.5 years younger.
Okay.
The day that I signed him up for the same type of program, I came home and I told my husband that I don't think that this is the right thing.
Do you think that is I've heard people have similar experiences where they know in their gut, right? Well, I don't really believe in a gut anymore. I believe in a God that's creating that gut, right?
Yes.
But I didn't know if you attributed it at that point, just because, again, we're going to talk a little bit about that later. Do you attribute that to God knowing it was him saying, like, these are your kids and it's okay and they don't have to go? Or was it just like, this is my mom's self saying no?
I mean, looking back, you can always see God's goodness in what he's doing in your life and how one thing leads to the next. So I do believe that it was absolutely God, and he was really reaching me in a different way at that time in our life. And there was one of the things when we when I started saying, I think that I want to keep him home. And at this point, we had also enrolled our daughter in the public kindergarten. So she had been enrolled. And it started to lay on my heart, and my husband kind of laughed at me and said, we're not. We are not homeschooling.
right?
No, absolutely not. Our kids are not going to be the weird kids. And that was one of the, the big things in our last interview together. Was
no
him
weirdos.
saying that no weirdos. And I'm proud to say that, I mean, we're all a little bit weird.
And we're supposed to be.
Yes. But that our kids are, they are very well adjusted and very confident and very, they are, now they're definitely not the weird kids in comparison to what I hear some stories from others. It was something that had laid on my heart. And then that really had to grow in my husband. And really, when I first started, my outlook on education as a whole is totally different now than it was back then, even.
Because why? What do you attribute that to? Or how has it changed? That's what's made it different.
Well, when I first started, I was really probably more looking at the academic side of things. But then whenever I was looking at curriculum and making all of those choices, and then God was working on me and all of the things that were happening within myself, I started to understand the true importance of a biblical worldview and how confused I was myself.
So that right there, what you just said, that you were thinking about curriculum for your kids, and it was really God working on you probably first, right? To use them as that catalyst, which I have felt very similarly convicted watching our daughter go through school and being like, I did not know that.
Yes. I mean, I
didn't know that. And
I am learning right alongside our kids. And I mean, it's no wonder kids in the world are so confused, because what they're learning in Sunday school or at church is so contradictory to the things that they're learning in school. And there really is only one truth. And so that was, I mean, it's been a whole evolution even for myself on, making sure that the whole child is educated and, and down even into the nitty gritty of curriculum. So it's been.
So what curriculum do you use? What do you end up now that you're kind of like, you've rethought some things and you're planning now, and it looks so different, like you mentioned, from where you started. For somebody that's listening,
it does look different. My thoughts and my views about curriculum as a whole have changed.
Sure. And you didn't, so to be also like back up for people, you did not have an education background before you started this. So even to have that phrasing of your views of curriculum, like if you're not in education, I think you think it's one thing and it's done, and you don't know there's even within secular education a crazy amount of differing outlooks. And then you come over into the biblical worldview and ideas and mentality, and it just adds another layer, which is crazy.
It is a completely different layer whenever you are adding the biblical worldview, and you are, through all things and all conversations trying to teach your children.
Right. You don't even want to necessarily say you're adding it. You're starting with the heart of God, right? You're starting there to filter. But
also that curriculum it doesn't have to be hard and fast and like strict, that it's really just a guide. And when you fill yourself with God and with the Holy Spirit to guide you, you start to see your kids totally different, and their abilities and what their paths are, and that you use them then as a tool and not as check the box, because that really was kind of what I was doing, was just checking the box. But so I was doing all of the curriculum very, structured, follow along. And I felt like that it was kind of, it was going against our natural nature and our children's natural nature. So a few months ago, actually, I kind of pulled myself back a little bit, trusting, trusting always. And I set the books down.
Okay.
And I have let the natural, because learning is such a natural process when we just let it happen.
So what does that mean? I know what I think that means. If I'm remembering back to, kids being little, set the books down and let it be. What does that mean in the Mackie household? We still do books, and we still have to do math, and we still have to do all of those things. But when I wasn't forcing things, nature took its course. Okay. And so our daughter has written persuasive essays on her own. She writes lots in her journal. She's written a book. She's, but in the books, when she was being told what to write and how to write it, there was a resistance. Okay. And so I started to see the heart in her, and kind of shifted a little bit more that way. And so, which is kind of makes me jealous as a teacher, because I would see that a lot. If you gave less guidance, the kids could kind of take off where they wanted to go. And it was awesome, except I had a formula. Right. I had a thing in front of me, and I had to make sure we were all doing A, B, C, and D. And so we couldn't necessarily do that. And I just think that sounds appealing. And of course, that's, I think, God's design in it, because he does not make us to be little cookie cutters, one after the other. So what a cool example of that. It's right there.
I fought it for a long time, thinking, we just needed to push through, press through, discipline, and, all of those things. But it's ended up being a blessing. And it's not that, the books aren't happening, because she's still reading and she's still doing all of the things that needs to happen. But there's been a spark of joy that's been brought back into it. So it's been such a cool thing to, kind of come full circle. Now I'm still teaching our son to read. And so, that part needs a very structured thing, because otherwise I would have a hard time. But now that I'm, seeing things a little bit more and just kind of trusting the process is processing. And God is good, and he's been faithful, and it's been so, so good.
I think that's just a neat transition. That's just a place to look at with reflection, and just know I started here, now I'm here, and I probably won't be there in another 3 to 4 years. It's going to be different. And it's cool when it comes to education and learning, depending on what term you use, because everybody has different words for what's happening in their home, of course. But then there's also you as a person, right? If you look back and kind of where you're at now, where you were, and where you think you might go. Where, if you don't mind me asking, where is Tyler in that piece of it with you as a family? If we kind of transition and talk more about you guys as a couple, and how you're choosing to be faith-based in your family as you look at your kids. What does that look like for you guys?
Well,
not that you want to speak totally for him, but just as I know I can talk a little bit on Chris and I and kind of our journey together, and then filter off into my own. But.
No, I know that Chris was someone that was really no, we're going, we're finding a new church, we're gonna, he was very, and even just in his own professional career,
right? It's shifted.
It has shifted, because what he was saying and how he stood so firm has been blessed. That his faithfulness has been blessed. That's not exactly been our experience. We still have, I think in our last episode, we kind of talked about, I had some beef with the church and how they handled everything through COVID, and, that, when people needed them the most, they shut down, and, the community part was lost. And I think that there are still some parts of that that's healing in the both of us. So we have continued to go and visit other churches. We've been to one a few times, and then there's been travel, and there's there's always something. But
so for you guys, it isn't an everyday Sunday or an every week Sunday at church type of thing, or do you do things at home, or do you do
it? It is more home for us.
And there's no, I want to be clear, I don't think there's a right or a wrong necessarily at all for people. That's why I wanted to do something like this, because I do think that there are the families that are like, we are never missing, we are going, and that's great. But maybe it's not for you.
Value in going. I mean, we both went to church as kids. I mean, for me, I was in church every time that the doors were opened. I loved it. I would walk myself over a mile to church. That was my thing. But I played church, but I didn't have a relationship. And so really that is what has changed for me is the relationship part. Myself with Jesus. I read the Bible in entirety. I just finished it last week. That's the first time in my life. I'm almost 43. And so when you do that, you have a completely different view on life as a whole. And he sees that. He is warming to the idea. We talk about it, but our kids see that, and we practice it at home through all of our conversations. And, the kids and I will do a devotional, in the mornings. Presley will read the Bible to Turner. But it's just something that, that we do all day long in all of our conversations. And so I think that that's really one of the greatest blessings of them being home with me all the time, is because any of those questions and any of the conversations that come up about anything in life at all, that now, though I will never fully be educated, now I have a better understanding myself, so I can help to shepherd their minds and their hearts where they need to be. And sometimes they'll call us out, and they are wise little people.
Right.
So
I feel like I get stumped. I was sharing, I think on an earlier episode, that we had a conversation one night. It was in Missouri, as you know, we had a lot of initiatives, things on the ballot that were, questions that are biblically rooted. And so there was a lot of discussion. And there was one night where Chris was in bed because he has, he's asleep far sooner than I am. And I had the kitchen conversation with the 3 teenagers. And it was intense and it was hard. And I was like, I don't know. And so I was busy, Google searching and Bible searching and asking later. And, I thought, what an awesome way that they're pushing me to become more solid as a Christian, so that I can turn around and then do it again for them. And
exactly.
It's neat. It's neat to see that happen.
Our kids have for sure, absolutely for sure, done that for me, and really developed my relationship with him. Because honestly, I love being home with our kids. I would not have it any other way. I truly enjoy them as people, but it's hard, and I'm an introvert. So I need some time sometimes. And so, it really is through the peace and the strength that I get through him that I'm able to do it, because otherwise I would fall short every day.
You just said something that struck me earlier when you were talking about the church and kind of being frustrated with the church a little bit. And that's, again, I think that's fine. And I think you're not the only one. I think you and I are probably in some similar Facebook groups where we see people searching and they have their checklist of what they want in churches, and they're never going to get, just like any other situation, you're never going to get it perfect, ever. But what are you, again, and I'm asking this as assuming that there are people listening who also are in your similar shoes. And so I'm curious for you, what are things you are looking for, knowing there's no perfect, knowing nothing's going to check all the boxes? What are you looking for in a church when you're searching, when you're visiting, when you're attending? What are a few things that you're trying to find or want?
For me, I want it to be Spirit-led and more on fire. I want it to be, I want them to talk about the hard things, like what was on the ballot.
Mm-hmm.
I want that to be something that they do touch on and that they're not shy of. For my husband, he wants a leader. My husband is a very strong, masculine type, and he wants to look up to somebody that can lead him someplace that he would want to be, and it not be somebody that's, we have attended church at different places that he's like, I wouldn't follow that guy anywhere. Like, I mean, he says really nice things, but he doesn't strike me. So I think that for a family, that it is hard for everybody to get something, because it's like the ones that he has liked and he has connected in with, I felt were a little bit more secular, and kind of like just feel good motivational type. And not that that's wrong. And I think that it's okay to start there if that's, what begins your journey. But because I am a little bit deeper in at this point, I want to be fed in a different way. I don't need to feel good. I want biblical truths.
I think that's something that's important to say, just because, again, as Chris and I have gone back and forth over, like, how did we even get to where we are right now, and that kind of thing. And you still spoke, though, talking about needing the Spirit and needing a good leader, and biblical truth. And I think that's important, because in my opinion, it isn't just they've got a great youth program, which
I know,
is
and
helpful,
our kids have a hard time finding that too.
Or they have a great music, and it's hard, right? And again, are you gonna always meet everything? No. And we had some, I think, reservations with where we were, or at least I did. And I've been really fascinated to watch things fall into place at the timing that was intended. Not my timing, right?
I know, it never is. He's funny like that.
And so I think that's great to hear. And I think it's food for thought for people, like to know what you're looking for, but knowing may not check all the boxes that you're hoping, even though you're not even looking for some very specifics.
We will continue to go back to the church that we had been most recently attending, and like I signed my daughter and I up. We're going to do a food bank next Saturday, even with and through the church. And so I want that part of her education as well, that she sees doing for others.
Well, and that's an interesting thing too, when you talk about wanting or needing or looking for something for the elementary kids or the youth group and things like that. But at the same time, there's so much value to be gained in generational, just forgetting this group meets on this time and this group, but serving together and serving with the people that are 80 and 60 and 40 and
that is one of the
10,
things that I have liked about the church that we've been attending, is that once a month, the kids are in service with the adults.
Okay.
And so they're able to see, what it really is.
Right. Which I think you have to have that as well. That approach that we take with our kids, I think, is what kind of lays that groundwork. And they're going to make their own choices as they get older and decide, no, thank you. That, that church that's not for me. And, we have one that he is attending church, but he goes where he chooses to go. And that was a hard thing for me to be like,
that he's not going to your church.
Right. And
as long as he's going.
But he's going, and it's biblical. And I did check. I was like behind the scenes, like tell me a little bit about this church. I want to know about, this one. And
as any good mom would.
But he found it, right? And like you said something too, it's okay to start sometimes at a place that isn't maybe necessarily all in on like the biblical hardcore stuff. Now, I know what I know now, and I know what I believe now.
Yes.
But I didn't start there.
No,
and
none of us do.
I think that is a good thing to say for people who, not everybody's going to go all in right here. I call them like the baby steps, right? And so maybe that motivational church that I would hope it's preaching the right thing. That's my goal. But at the same time, it can drive you to where you want to go, right?
It is. I mean, the lessons are solid. It's just they don't touch on the hard stuff. the really hard things, and and unfortunately, it's the political things because
they've been made political, right?
Like Allie Stuckey says that voting is important because people are important, or policies, or I forget what it is that she says, but those things have to be discussed. Sure, they have to be talked about.
Right,
it's important. Stuff. It matters.
It does. And that is why having these conversations, I think, matters, because not everybody knows what they want, knows what they're looking for, or how to impart that down. I'm okay here. I think when Chris and I have talked a lot about this, I'm good one-on-one, but you put me out in a big group, and I don't usually sit around if I'm not sure of the group. I don't sit around in an evangelism style mode, even though I'm like, ooh, what you're saying is not, I want to speak to you and to you and to you, but I hold back on that. And so I'm kind of curious on you, because you've done a little bit more social media wise. You're a little bit more, I would say, I'll just, that I know people can't see this if they're listening, but kind of that hardline place. I think that's
I'm very
awesome.
Outspoken.
Yes, which I love. And I think that's encouraging for a lot of people to see. How did that come to be? Because you do that with politics, but you do it with faith as well. And I think you're leading from a good place. You're not leading from a political place, which I think is important too. But how did that has that always been? I mean, Have you always been? Because you said introvert, which I know doesn't necessarily mean quiet, but there's a different place there. So can you talk a little bit about that?
I'm very passionate about what I'm passionate about. And when I'm passionate about something, I can speak about it. And don't mince words, generally speaking. And I don't care who I offend, because it's not my problem.
Well, and because some of what you're saying, it's not yours.
It's not mine.
Some of it might be, but a lot of it is
It is what I believe that God wants, and how he has spoken to me and convicted me. And I think that we all are given gifts. And when it comes to communication, writing is usually mine. So social media was it was just how I got the word out.
But that's important, because there's a lot fairly to bash about social media, but there is a lot of good that can come from it if it is used well. And like you said, if your gift is writing and having the time to process and put things down on paper, so to speak, that is just as effective as somebody who can speak well.
I think that everybody needs to hear a message in different forms, that we were not made the same. We were made in his image, but we are not the same. And our paths aren't the same, and everyone is going to receive messages. I mean, it's like the same thing as church. We're all going to receive messages in different ways, and maybe it's going to strike a nerve. Or
do you strike a nerve often? Do you get people that come at you or argue, or do you feel like you?
Not anymore.
Good. That's interesting. Why not anymore, do you think?
Maybe they weeded themselves out. I don't know. I mean, maybe they realized that I'm not backing down, and maybe their heart was convicted through things that I have said, or I don't know. And that's not really my worry, but I do not get the resistance that I did. Now, I did recently kind of take a step back as I was, as I said earlier, I mean, educationally and academically, we kind of pulled things back a little bit. And in that, I also, pulled myself back, just so I could hear him a little bit better. And, but it's been years probably since I've really had huge pushback on social media. But this was before your time too. I had some pretty good social media spats.
Which, now there's an age thing too to that, right? Like you kind of learn, like I don't need to be there. There's a time and a place.
Yes.
Like there's a time and a place.
I lost friends.
Sure. Sure.
And they did not appreciate the things that I said. But then they came back and, were...
well, sometimes people need space. They just need space to grow and to think, as do we. I mean, we all do.
Yes. And to realize that the heart of the things that I was saying was good and that it was
true.
And true.
Always important.
Yes. So.
Well, so when you pull back, so you said you kind of pulled back, you were taking a break, thinking about education, God was working on you. What does that look like for you when you pull back and try to figure out what's next? And again, asking as no right or wrong, just everybody grows and thinks differently. And so if this is part of your journey, what does that mean? For some people, I think they dive into devotionals. Some people take long walks. Some people take their social media break. What does that mean for you when you kind of pull back and start rethinking on things and figure out what's next?
I just kind of go within.
Okay.
That's just how I kind of process things. And I did prayer walks, lots and lots of prayer walks.
Awesome. That's interesting.
And I shared that, and there were several people that were like, "What are prayer walks?" I'm like, I just go, I start my day in God's word, and we as a family start our day and we do our things, but then I take the dogs for a walk and I just pray and I try to hear him, and I pull back from consuming so much content and become renewed myself, so then I have something to give, but also just to hear what it is that he wants. Am I on the right path? Am I, doing what's right for our kids? Is this what you want for our life and our family? And so, it makes it really easy and things organic when I just let him. I sleep
let
so
him do,
good
right?
at
Let
night.
him be, yes.
I have such peace about our life and what we're doing, and that it doesn't matter what anybody else says or thinks. And
that's really important. I think it's a great place, I think, to end the conversation too, because of all the things we do, knowing that we want to find that peace and want to be in that place of peace with him. I think how we go about it is obviously going to look different, but I like that idea of just kind of going within and just letting it.
You have to be quiet. You have to eliminate the noise to be able to hear what it is that he's speaking to you and for you. And I think that's hard for me, because I've always, in my professional career, I really valued being the expert. And I've realized that I'm the expert of nothing. I think it's like, you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know that you don't know it. But it's, through that I've realized that he is good through all of it. And
I love that. Well, I think that's a good message for people, that he is within it. He is leading us through it. He'll take us what's next, right? I love it. Ashley, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today and your wisdom, because I do think you said you aren't an expert, but we are when it comes to our kids. And I think the best thing we can do is keep understanding that there's, room to grow and things to figure out and learn. I appreciate your time. I appreciate Tell Tyler. I appreciate just diving in a little bit to the two of you, even though I know I don't want to go too far on that for people, but it means a lot. I hope people gain a lot. I think there's something to be said about continually having these conversations that pull us where we need to be and push us where we need to be. Sometimes it can be either or. We appreciate, as always, our audience listening and watching today's episode, and we hope you enjoyed it. You can always reach out, let us know your thoughts on the show. Check out our show notes below for more information, and we'll see you next time. Making the Leap is a podcast presentation courtesy of the Herzog Foundation. We'd love your feedback by rating us and commenting on the show.
And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on Making the Leap.